The following episode of Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show was recorded before the writer's strike began. Our guest is in full support of the strike and stands in solidarity with the effort of fellow writers in their fight for fair wages and protections.
Hi, I'm Andy Yerkes, and you're watching the podcast where nostalgia comes alive. It's Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show. Roll it.
Welcome to Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, the podcast where nostalgia comes alive. Since July of 2021, Jake and his friends have interviewed professionals in the worlds of acting, directing, writing, puppeteering, and many more. Who will they be chatting with in this week's interview? Find out in this Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show episode.
Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, where nostalgia comes alive. Happy you're here with us. I'm your host, Jake Deffinbaugh. With me today is always our co-host, Chris Bixby, and Matt Bingel. How you guys doing?
Doing good, Jake. Hello, everybody.
How are we doing,
doing,
Jake?
That's great to hear. I'm doing great, as always. Chris, what do we have for today?
Very excited about today's guest. He is a writer. He wrote for Sesame Street for several years. He wrote for a number of other TV series such as The Fairly OddParents, Doc McStuffins, and we're going to talk about that and some other things he's done as well. And here he is, Ed Valentine. Happy to have you here.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, pleasure.
Of
Awesome.
course. Very happy to have you here.
Definitely. So, in your own words, could you kind of introduce yourself a little bit and what you do?
Sure. So I'm Ed Valentine. I started out as an actor and a playwright, and I still am sometimes an actor and definitely a playwright. I went I've had a number of different lives. I was the world's worst barista for a while. I was really, really bad at that. And an office temp. And then for a number of years, I actually taught elementary school. I was a fourth grade teacher. I taught English, math, and social studies. And I had a great time, but I realized while I was doing that I think I really had sort of left the creative pursuits and the things that I had really planned to do behind, specifically theater and writing. And it was during that time that I started taking classes. This is now around the year 2000, the turn of the century. And I started taking classes at night with a famous playwright, a fabulous playwright named Tina Howe. She saw a great deal of potential in me. She knew that I had a big imagination. And I think she realized that I had, I could do more than be in a classroom each day. There's nothing wrong with being in a classroom. I just had other things that I wanted to do as well. So with Tina's encouragement, I went to NYU for grad school. And it was there that I started taking classes and writing for television. I found that the plays that I write are often big. I would have the death of the giant lumberjack Paul Bunyan and a little girl who tries to bury him, or the true mother of the flag instead of Betsy Ross, and all these kind of large, epic, sometimes Americana themes. And it wasn't necessarily what was in vogue at the time. A lot of people in plays were doing small kind of Starbucks plays or couch plays or plays set in a hotel room. And so I think when some of the teachers there in NYU in the grad program started to see my work, they were like, another place that would be a good fit for you is television, and specifically animated television. I think that they recognize the potential in my style to be a good fit for animation writing in general. I worked there. I studied with Charlie Rubin, who was a really Charlie Rubin. Charlie Rubin was later. I started with Joe Kelly first, and then who worked on a lot of Marvel stuff. I did a lot of animation with Joe, and it was after I graduated from that program that I applied for and got the Nickelodeon Writing Fellowship back in 2007. And so I moved out to LA at that point and started writing for television when I was there. My work on Sesame was actually on a parallel track, but everything I can do, I can trace back to the night that I went to Tina House class. I think that the path that I'm on is exactly from here, and so it's been a great time.
Awesome. So what was your background like and how did you grow up?
I grew up in Jersey and New York City with a little bit of time in Boston and North Carolina, but mostly on the East Coast and in the tri-state area up here, where I still live. I'm still in New York. So going to California later was a bit of a shock for me. It's a different world out there. I grew up. We moved around a little bit with my family, so I think a lot of time was spent reading books, watching television, enjoying movies. But yeah, a lot of time is, every time you move, it takes a little bit of time to make friends again. And so I think that sort of fostered the imagination. I loved, I was growing up at this incredibly fertile time for movies, for Star Wars and the Muppet movie and The Empire Strikes Back. A little bit later, Ghostbusters and Indiana Jones, right? So these great, big, epic adventures, and comic adventures too. I think people forget that Raiders is an incredibly, incredibly funny film, and Ghostbusters is hilarious, really. And so I think those things really fostered my sense of humor and fostered my taste as I grew up and started writing on my own.
So what was your very first writing job?
My first writing job, well, out of grad school, was I guess they staffed us during my Nickelodeon writing, my writing fellowship, which was a year long. I was staffed on a bunch of different shows, and the one that was really the best fit for me was Fairly OddParents. And then I was hired on for that show. Yeah.
Awesome.
You a fan? You're a fan, I hope?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's awesome.
We grew up watching that show a lot.
Yep.
So.
That's awesome.
Amazing show.
And, yeah, it's super funny. And so I was staffed on that as a fellow. And then from there, I guess I was part of the writing room, and fellowship is an incredible, incredible opportunity. And I was actually on a couple of shows before that, but Odd Parents was really the best fit for my sense of humor and my sensibility. And I love the animation. I love the characters, and there were so many stories that you can tell with them, with Cosmo and Wanda and Timmy. And I think it was a good fit. So I was hired on for that show right out of the fellowship. So the fellowship was sort of technically my first writing job. It was, it really was they were very, very clear. My boss at the time, Karen Kirkland, who is actually left her job as head of the fellowship and eventually became an agent, and she's now my agent. Karen was very clear. Yeah, she's been great. She's been a really great force in my life. And I think, she was very, very clear from the beginning. I remember going to my first interview and kind of saying, well, I know that, we're here as writers, but probably people will need us to get coffee or get the newspaper, because I'd actually been a page at NBC in one of my other lives. And I knew that was something that people certainly end up doing, right, for executives. And Karen was very clear. She said, absolutely not. If you get this job, you're here to be a writer, and you're not a gopher. You're not fetching coffee. People need to see you and respect you as a writer. And so you're going to be in the room, you're going to be contributing, and you're going to be learning the room. So that really was I would say my first writing job. And then the first staff job was at Odd Parents. And I wrote on that show for, I think it was the 7th season. And I'm really, really proud to have been a part of that.
Nice.
Awesome.
So now, how did you begin working on Sesame Street? Because like I said in your introduction, you wrote for that for a couple of years too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was on for Sesame for about 7 years. And I still occasionally do some stuff working with their international division. Sesame Street was the show that taught me how to read and taught me how to write. and puppets are a big part of my life. I think a lot of my early work was trying to recreate the feeling of the camaraderie that the Muppets have on the Muppet Show. I think that's probably why I got into theater in the first place. And I still use puppets. I've actually written lots of stuff for puppets in theater, and I often try to put puppets or masks into the plays that I write. So Sesame was always kind of an absolute dream job, right? And I was it was while I was actually at NYU that I met he came in. He was one of the head writers of the show at one time, Lou Berger.
Oh yeah, we actually
Previous guest of
him.
ours.
Did you really?
Yeah, he's great.
Lou's a great friend of ours. Yeah,
Yes.
Lou is tremendous. What an amazing guy. He came and actually spoke to my graduating class, kind of about television, and he was so upbeat and so positive, and he actually had known me because of Tina Howe's class. I had gotten a couple of awards in playwriting that Lou and his wife Lily were in charge of giving. So he actually knew my work, even though we'd never actually met. So after he spoke to my class, I went and introduced myself to him, and he said, "Why don't you come meet me at the offices?" So I went and met him at the Sesame offices, which are awesome. It's really, that was of course not the set, but the walls are full of chalkboard paintings of the characters.
Oh yeah.
And very real slice of my childhood there. And during the course of we really hit it off. And I think Lou asked me if I'd ever be interested in writing for the show. And I said, of course I would. So he put me through an audition process of writing some scripts, writing some characters, writing some shorts. That went on probably for about a year until he was, I guess, no longer head writer. By the time my fellowship was over, that audition period was over too. And Joey Mazzarino was the head writer then. And then I was brought on to Sesame as a full staff writer there. Wrote for them for several years, and one of the very proudest things that I think it'll probably be one of the things I'm proudest of on my deathbed is that I got to go overseas to work with the Indian show, the show in Bangladesh. I even got to work with the Afghanistan team. We met in India, and really I went over a few times with those, and boy, that was just so life-changing. You probably know that there are over 40. I'm not sure even how many there are now, but there are.
There's a lot of international co-productions of Sesame.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so your viewers might not know that they're really authentic local productions of Sesame Street that still pay homage to what Sesame Workshop does and what the American Sesame Show is. Some of the characters that you'd recognize are on there as well. Sometimes it kind of depends on country to country. Elmo is often on there. Grover is a big hit usually around the world, depending on the country. Bert and Ernie, but really the countries get a chance to develop their own characters. The lead character in India is a little girl named Chamki in a familiar Indian schoolgirl dress, and to foster women's empowerment and women's education. Chamki she loves judo and she loves soccer and she wants to be a scientist. And she goes to school. She loves school. She loves her friends. But I think the show does so much good for all the kids, and often really meets them where they are. Right. I think making sure that the shows they do locally are written by people on the ground in the countries, the music, the direction, the puppeteering. Every time they start a new season, they bring or start a new team. Kind of periodically, they'll bring a team of producers, writers, puppeteers, directors over to help people there create a show that's both authentically Sesame and authentically local. So I would go over as a head writer of those first seasons to make sure that we were all in sync, and then kind of step away and hand the show off to the local team. It was just fantastic. I got to see the world, but I got to meet these incredible people who were all united in a mission to really help make kids' lives better, and to educate and entertain. That I'm really, really proud of that.
Now I'm curious, do you have any favorite episodes or inserts that you wrote for Sesame?
Oh my gosh. Let's think. So I think one of my favorites was called Grover Does It All. Grover Does It All was an episode where Grover, because as you know, Grover has all sorts of different jobs. One day he's a cab driver, the next he's a chef. So Grover wears many hats, and I think I sympathize with Grover and empathize with Grover, I suppose, because I wear a lot of hats too, and juggling life can be hard, right? Juggling all the things you want to do or try to do can be difficult. So I wrote an episode where Grover literally, on the same day, I think he wanted to be a basketball player, a ballet dancer, a cook, a painter, and there might have been a couple of other things in there. And so we had a lot of fun putting Grover through his paces, in which he becomes increasingly exhausted as the day goes on. The 10 minutes, right? 10-minute, 12-minute episode, because it's part of the street scenes, the street stories, the live parts of Sesame. And the lesson there was, of course, that, it's great to try a lot of different things, but maybe you want to try them one at a time. Maybe you don't need to do them all at the very same moment. And so it was really fun. I feel like it's been a little while now, but I think we had like all these extra hands where he's juggling stuff, and he's trying to literally juggle plates and ballet dance and do basketball at the same time. It got pretty crazy.
Wow.
That one was super fun. But another one I think that will always be very, very close to my heart is the very first one I did, which was the first street scene that I did, street story, was Sesame Street Osaurus. And in that episode, I guess I think it was Elmo who found what he thought were the bones of a dinosaur. He was determined that these had to be the bones of a dinosaur, but really they were, was it Grover? I can't remember I think maybe it was Grover. Maybe Grover found what he thought were the bones, but they turned out to be like a ladle and a xylophone. And what they decided to do, the characters, was that they would put them together to look like a dinosaur. They'd make a model of a dinosaur, even though they weren't real bones. But for me, the real joy of that was I wrote this because I do write lyrics. I guess Joey, when he hired me, asked, do you write lyrics? And I said, yes, I do. And so I wrote a song called The Paleontologist Conga. And we, I hadn't worked with the show before. I didn't know kind of what their process was. So I wrote a somewhat complicated song with a bit of wordplay about dinosaurs and paleontologists. And when I got to the studio, they kind of, almost as a last minute decision, they were like, oh, wait, what if Grover and Elmo, and I forget who, I think it was Rosita in that one. What if instead of the characters singing it on the street, what if they went into kind of a fantasy at an archaeological dig, and they like had paleontologists like digging real bones, right? So this was like a last minute change. So I got to the studio, and all of a sudden there were these whatnot Muppets and like a set of an archaeological dig and these giant bones, and all these characters in pith helmets, along with Grover and Elmo kind of dancing along and singing this song. It was just really, really magical to be suddenly like, oh yeah, this can be this doesn't have to just be on the street. Like this can happen anywhere. It was a real marriage of the writing and the music team and like the puppet wranglers and suddenly like the costume people. It was quite a set people. Of course, it was really super impressive that they made this magic and that we all made it together.
Nice. On the subject of Rosita, one of my other favorites that you wrote was the episode Mi Amiguita Rosita.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, yes.
That music was done by Lin-Manuel Miranda, as you may know.
Oh yeah.
So I did not get to meet Lin-Manuel, but he wrote such great music for that show. Thanks. What's your memory of that show?
Well, because as a kid, Rosita was always one of my favorite characters. So really, just getting to see any episode focus on Rosita was really special.
Oh yes,
Oh, yeah, so-
absolutely.
Yeah,
Which also,
and yeah, Carmen's a previous guest of ours too.
Oh, fabulous. Carmen is wonderful. Carmen's
Oh,
just
yeah.
such an
Sweet.
extraordinary person. What
So
a wonderful,
sweet.
wonderful person.
So sweet.
Yeah.
I will tell you that episode came, because of course it's, there's a great education team at Sesame Workshop. And I think we were talking about different issues that people face. And I think we had someone come in and if I recall, he was talking about how so many kids books that are geared for Latinos, feature, I know it's going to sound awful, but they said over and over that it's a kid, especially if it's Mexico, it's a kid with a sombrero sitting with a burro under a cactus. And that becomes kind of offensively stereotypical right away. And he was like, we need to, the speaker was talking to us as writers and creators of the show, and all the whole department wide kind of have these educational meetings in which we think at the beginning of the season about what's next and what do we need to address. And I think this was the idea was to give, in that episode, if people haven't seen it, Rosita gets a book where there's a kid with a sombrero and a burro and a cactus, and she's sort of like, man, I've got more to me than this. I'm so much broader than that little slice of life, which doesn't apply to me at all. I live on Sesame Street. This has nothing to do with me. And then she ends up writing her own story, in which she kind of talks about her culture and the culture of her family, showing that we are all very diverse, and we have a lot of, even within groups, there's lots of ways to be who you are. I'm glad you like that show, Chris. That's one I'm very fond of.
so who are some of your favorite characters to write for?
Oh my gosh. Well, let's see. It depends on the show, right? Cosmo was a dream to write for. Cosmo is super, super, super funny, and so wacky on Fairly OddParents. Certainly on Sesame, Grover again was I think the kind of maybe the closest to me.
Gotta love Grover. Gotta love.
A lot of people have said Grover in the past.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah.
Not the only one. You won't be the last.
Yeah.
I am not surprised. Grover.
I'm not
Grover
either. I'm
Yeah.
not surprised either.
Grover is just so endearing, and he tries so hard, and he fails so hard, and it's really, it's just sort of kind of an evergreen comic, just really, the comic potential in that is endless. I think. I wrote for My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic. I think Rainbow Dash was really fun to write there. I ended up writing a lot of the Cutie Mark Crusaders episodes for some reason. Hopefully I did it well, but I was a little surprised because it didn't necessarily, like, those wouldn't be necessarily the characters that I think I first gravitated to during the show. I would say that Scootaloo, when in the earlier seasons when Scootaloo was trying to uh, hoping to fly like Rainbow Dash because she loves Rainbow Dash, but couldn't quite fly. And there was an episode I wrote called Flight to the Finish, where she almost quit like a big Olympic type competition because she couldn't fly. And I think where I was, my way into this was this feeling that the other ponies still loved her, and the Cutie Mark Crusaders were like, it's okay if you can't fly. There are a lot, maybe you will and maybe you won't fly someday, but here's what you can do. You can do the things that make you make you. So I think I found my way into the warmth of those episodes. They allowed them to be very kind and tender towards each other, and I really appreciated that. But of the grown-up ponies, I think Rainbow Dash was for me the most fun to write. I think everybody tends to have their favorite. Any fan of that show tends to have their favorite pony, but I really liked her kind of puppyish energy, and her drive. Like, it was very, very exciting. And who wouldn't want to fly? So that's a really fun part of her. Those are some of the ones that I think of. But like, I've gotten to write for Spider-Man when I wrote for Ultimate Spider-Man. And I will say I got to write a Deadpool episode called Ultimate Deadpool.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
yeah, and writing Deadpool was honestly really one of the very, very best things that I got to do. Um, Deadpool is completely off the wall. And Joe Kelly, who I'd mentioned before, and I did misspeak before. I got tongue tied when I came on because I was talking about I had two Rubens in my life. I had Charlie Rubin, who taught me at grad school at NYU. He was is a great TV writer, and he wrote a lot for Law and Order, I guess SVU, but he's very famous for Seinfeld. And Charlie was a great teacher and mentor. I had Fred Rubin at Nickelodeon, but one of the great things about one of the other teachers that I had, who was Joe Kelly, who I mentioned before. Joe was the one. He was one of my teachers at NYU, and then with Man of Action, he became a writer for Marvel stuff. And he gave me this Deadpool episode, and I remember him saying, I was like, so how far, like, the way they worked was they would give you an outline, and the Man of Action as a team and kind of really gone through the outline beat by beat with Disney at the time to really try to hand you as a writer an episode that was kind of fully vetted. Even if the dialogue wasn't there, the beats of the episode had really been thought out. So they did this amazing job of giving you a lot to work with, and a very clear roadmap to work with. It was great. And I remember, I think at the end of that episode, in their outline, it said something like, and then Deadpool and Spider-Man fight, and something crazy happens, and Deadpool goes off. And I was like, Joe, what? How crazy can I get? Like, what are the rules here? And he was like, just go for it, see what you come up with. And I was okay, we'll see. And I think I had Deadpool like as a Deus Ex Machina. I think he rode off in a sleigh with a Santa hat, a sleigh pulled by alligators or something.
Oh, wow.
And it was this crazy ending. And I was like, they're not gonna go for this. This is too far. And they made it. And it was like, okay, that's the line. You can go as far as you want to go with Deadpool.
So speaking of writing for characters on Sesame, you got to write for the segments Abby's Flying Fairy School and Cookie's Crummy Pictures. What was it like writing
right.
those?
Those were fun, right? So Abby's Flying Fairy School was something very new for Sesame Street. It was their first fully animated piece, as I recall, with the characters. And they did 3D animation. My understanding, and this story may be apocryphal, but but I'm going with it, was that the animation, excuse me, at first was not quite. It didn't look quite Muppety. It didn't quite look like the Sesame Street Muppets. And someone realized that they had based the armature on a regular skeleton, on a human skeleton, which is what you would think you would do, right? But what they really needed to do to make the characters live in the world of the Sesame Street Muppets was they had to build the armature on a hand, on a on what a human hand would look like inside a puppet. And this is the story I was told, that when they did that, then they started looking like they were fully in the puppet world. I thought the animation on Abby's Flying Fairy School was great, and it really allowed us to tell funny stories that were sort of out of the world of the street, in this kind of crazy world with magic. I didn't write too many of the Cookies Crummy pictures. I think I might have just written one, and that was a Harry Potter parody.
Oh,
And as
yes, I
somebody who
remember that.
remember that one, yeah, as somebody who really really loves Harry Potter, I think that that was super fun to be able to do. I was not on set for that one. They did a lot of green screen stuff on those. But those were, I think, again, they were a little bit challenging because they were also interactive, and so you sort of had to, for those of you who haven't seen them, Cookie sort of plays their movie parodies at their heart, but each one of them is sort of an interactive game in which you have to figure out how. Cookie has a series of challenges that get a little bit harder each time and a little bit more complicated. They were designed to kind of develop the viewer's executive function, so things like patience and choice making and task persistence, right? So you don't just throw up your hands and quit after something gets a little too hard. And really, that was kind of, for me, the most challenging part of that, to kind of not just tell a story that's from start to finish, but to tell to have a game that a viewer would be interacting with, where you could actually have them play along at home, where Cookie could actually turn to them, or one of the other characters could turn to the viewer and be like, which one would you choose? This is red and green. Which based on the different clues. I did find them that was kind of different than really telling a story that was just set on the street. And yeah, it was an interesting challenge. And again, the film parody part of that was right up my alley.
Nice. So aside from writing for the Sesame Street show, you also got to write for the Connect Sesame Street TV game for the Xbox 360. Can you kind of talk about your work on that?
Oh my gosh. I got to write for that one. Did I? That is a long time ago. I have to be honest. I really, look, I've been at this for a while, right? And so there are sometimes that, you do something and you don't, I know it's going to sound crazy, but if you work on as many things as I have, you don't always remember each one.
Yeah.
The Xbox Connect, do you remember anything about that? And to
Yeah,
refresh my memory,
it was
Oh,
kind of
man.
it was kind of like an interactive kind of thing, and there was like a there was a character in there that used like motion capture kind of technology.
That's right. There was. I feel like in this one too, there might have been some Guy Smiley stuff with game shows.
Hmm.
I think that does that ring a bell? Was that the one
Yeah,
I had worked on?
I
Yeah,
think so.
I
Yeah.
think those were fun. We got to do some alphabet stuff, which yeah, now I am remembering this now. And so we had to do some alphabet pieces. And so if I recall correctly, I think Guy Smiley was doing some game show stuff where different letters um, would be guest stars, right? Or they'd have to guess a certain letter. And if it's the ones I'm thinking of, I remember vaguely something about a Dolly Parton letter. Like I had a Dolly Parton parody that was a letter. Maybe it was letter D, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, you're right. There was that happened so long ago and kind of so briefly that I'm having a little trouble calling that one up. And those things are funny too because I think the technology was sort of new as far as what we could do interactively.
Yeah.
And I know that as writers we would sort of write them and hand them off to the tech team, and so that's one that it doesn't. I remember working on it. I just don't remember the content of it because I don't think I ever saw it in the end. I think one of the difficulties with TV, and I love TV. I love writing for TV. I've had this great career, and I really enjoy doing what I'm doing. But especially with animation, there's a huge time lag between the time you write something and the time that it actually gets out in the world. I feel like the very last episodes I wrote of Odd Parents, I think it was something like 3 or 4 years. It might have even been more between the writing and they're actually being on TV. To the point that, and a lot of this has to do with the Nickelodeon schedule and what their priorities are, right? It's not like broadcast networks used to be, where you would have a fall season premiere every year and they'd go through May and then do reruns. With cable and now with streamers, the kind of there's no fall season, there's no fall there's really not that kind of the business has changed so greatly. So there could be a lag of several years between the writing and the actual airing of something. And of course, in the meantime, the process of animation is so long and so arduous, goes through so many changes and so many hands that by the time you get something on the air, you probably moved on to 2 or 3 other things, right? I found that challenging when we were doing My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic, because we had this great fan base. The Bronies were so excited about it, and the Pegasisters, which is the female derivative of Brony, I guess, and people kind of were very excited when the show would go on, and we as writers were sort of encouraged to live tweet and get excited about it. It was super fun and super exciting. But when people would ask me, like, tell me why you made this choice or that, and you kind of have to think, like, when you're live tweeting it, you're like, why did I make that choice? Why? What? How did that episode come about? Or who actually, like, was that line rewritten by the board artists? Like, was that my joke? I can't remember. So that's been one of the really more interesting things about this. There's a lot of time between writing something and seeing something, if you indeed see it at all. There's a lot of stuff that I'm like, oh man, I like the Xbox stuff. I don't ever think I saw how it turned out. I'd love to. Send me a link.
Yeah, and Abby's Flying Fairy School is amazing. So, I remember a lot.
Yeah,
For me,
and
those characters. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say Leslie's a good friend of ours too, and in fact, as of taping, that Leslie's interview is the next to go up.
Oh,
Yes.
please tell her I said I haven't seen her in a while. She's
absolutely.
She's one of a kind, and what an incredible person, and what an incredible talent.
I know.
Yes.
Yeah, I know.
She's sweet.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Really one of the sweetest people we've ever had on. Certainly one of our favorites up there we've ever had on the show.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, actually, she was actually incredibly instrumental in my life. When she was doing a show, this is after I'd started writing for Abby's Flying Fairy School, and I was still at Nickelodeon. I was still on the West Coast. I was bi-coastal, but I was really based out there for about 7 years. And Leslie came in to do a show on to record a character on a show that I was writing for called Tough Puppy. Tough Puppy did not last too long.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But I written a couple of episodes of that, and Leslie came in to do a voice, and I got to introduce myself to her and say, "Hey, Leslie, I'm Ed Valentine. I've been writing for Abby's Flying Fairy School for several months now." And I told her that I love puppetry. I loved her work. And she suggested that I go to the O'Neill International Festival of Puppetry, which is held at the O'Neill Theater Center in Connecticut.
Oh,
Oh
nice.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you know
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
great.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Cause I know Pam Marciero is
Oh,
there
Pam is
too,
amazing.
like
Yeah.
currently.
Yeah.
Pam Marciero is the director of the O'Neill.
Yeah.
Pam is fantastic.
Oh,
And I did. So
also
this was back.
previous guest.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
another
this
previous guest.
is that right? Okay, she's great.
Yep.
Yes.
So
Yep.
Pam, I at that point, because I had really only been writing for the animated segments. At that point, I don't think I'd written any street segments yet. I'd never been on set, and so I didn't know any of the puppeteers. But I started to get to know them. I did go and develop my own puppetry work at the O'Neill after I knew my time at Odd Parents was winding down, and I wanted to do something that was sort of as far away from Hollywood as I could get, just to shake things up a bit. And I thought, puppetry is a love that I have, and with Leslie's encouragement, I sought that out and applied and got in, and that's been a huge force in my life. I became very very good friends with Tyler Bunch, who is just a
Yes.
wonderful
yeah.
person.
Yes.
Not only is he a wonderful actor and a wonderful person and a wonderful puppet actor, but he's a great, actor in his own right.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
Done a lot
Yeah.
of
So
wonderful on
Tyler,
camera acting as well. Yeah.
yeah,
Yes.
he's done a lot of
Yes.
incredible stuff. And Tyler's been in a number of my plays, and I just think he's an incredible talent and a great person. So it was this really, like, even though I thought I was kind of doing the O'Neill to maybe try something different than Hollywood, I ended up um, meeting all these wonderful people who kind of have enriched my creative life. So I've been very very lucky to get to call them friends and collaborators throughout the past years. So, and I have Leslie to thank for that.
Aw. So you also write some of the Sesame Street Muppets tweets on Twitter. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, that was super fun. That was I was tweeting a lot for Elmo back in, or I guess as I should say, helping Elmo tweet, right? Because his it's very
Sure,
hard
we'll
to
go
type.
with that.
Yeah.
It's very hard to
That's
type.
how you would put it.
Yeah.
It's very hard to type when you're a small red furry monster. So so I was
Yeah. Yeah.
I was helping Elmo tweet. And so I think and I did some Big Bird tweets too. I think I did some count tweets for a while. Was working with those characters. That was really really fun. I mean, it was sort of, as I recall, in the early-ish days of Twitter, and we were all sort of figuring out, like, what is this medium and how do you communicate a character through that? Can you communicate suspense? What humor looks like when it's, back then it was 140 characters was the limit, right?
Mhm.
One of the weirdest things now that I think there may be no limit now. I'm not sure. It feels, there was something great about having limits as a writer, right? You're like, okay, here it is. Here's this box that I have to fit this into. How can I put myself and the character I'm writing for into that box of rules and still come out with something authentic and real and lively? So there was a point at which Elmo was going for he was going down to Cape Canaveral, I believe that's correct, for the final space shuttle flight. And he was doing a lot of public appearances at that space shuttle flight to publicize space flight and NASA and astronomy, and really let kids in on the science of that. He had some really, if you look back in the archives, he had some really amazingly adorable space outfits, like astronaut outfits.
Oh yes.
It was
I think I remember
super
those.
sweet.
Yes.
And I think, for me, as his helper, as his tweeter, it was it was kind of exciting to learn little bits of science and try to make them digestible for the audience, and really through Elmo's eyes of seeing kind of how do you convey that momentousness of the very last flight of this spacecraft. When I was growing up, the shuttle flights were, it was so exciting every time one of them would take off, and this was really the end of an era. So how do you communicate that from a character who is very young himself? Like how do you kind of communicate that end of an era and the science behind this? Kevin Clash was still Elmo's puppeteer at that time.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
I remember he did
What a talent.
incredibly talented. And I remember being home in New York and visiting my parents in New Jersey, and kind of, so these things were happening. In some other cases, you write your tweets and they go out at later times, but this was because it was tied to a particular event, this historical event where the press was there. It was a very live kind of situation, right? So there had to be tweets that were ready to go at a moment's notice, and things were sort of changing on the ground. And I just remember watching Kevin do an interview with Elmo, and just the way he handled that crowd. Like I remember watching it remotely, watching his press conference, and he was just so really wonderful at making that character come to life in the way he could relate to playing him. Ryan Dillon is now playing Elmo, and Ryan is equally adept and just extraordinary at what he does. But it was one of those, like, it really was exciting, kind of in those early days, being like, oh yeah, now like we've got this whole team making sure that Elmo gets the word out about this shuttle flight, and to be part of it was really exciting.
Uh-huh.
So moving on from Sesame Street, you kind of brought this up earlier. You wrote scripts for a number of other TV series, including The Fairly OddParents, which you had brought up earlier. What was it like writing on that show?
Oh my gosh. So Sesame, of course, is, I think when I was a kid, probably the target was 4 to 6 years old. I think the target has grown increasingly younger a little bit. I think it might be now 2 to 5 years old, maybe even skewing a little bit younger. Odd Parents was really wild because the target was 6 to 11 and up, I would say, right? And so the things you can do, and have the characters say, there's sort of a cheeky humor that is very different from the humor in Sesame Street. And of course, the characters sometimes insult each other on Odd Parents in a way that they would never ever do on the street. And so it was fun for me to kind of, and again, that was really the first job that I had that was happening, I think, concurrently with Abby's Flying Fairy School. So working on those two different sides of my brain a little bit, the kind of sweeter, more heartfelt stuff for Abby's Flying Fairy School, and the more openly educational stuff, right? Though I tend to believe that everything that a kid watches is educational. I'm always I mean that saying that not everything and nothing should be pedantic and teachy, but I'm very aware that anything a kid turns on the TV to watch, because kids are so new to the world, that they're soaking in everything, and so that you are teaching, right? No matter what you're doing. I'm always a little aware of that, and there are shows that I wouldn't probably write for because I think the sense of humor can be mean or
makes sense.
or crass. If it's a kid show, I really, that's not my sense of humor, and I sort of stay away from that. That being said, Odd Parents, I think the stipulation was those characters. Obviously, Timmy loves Cosmo and Wanda, and they really, really love him. But within that parameter, Timmy is Timmy is kind of a wild kid, and he can be greedy. He can act out. He can, you want to stay away from bratty, but certainly he's not a goody two shoes, and that was really kind of refreshing. Um, I could go. It's kind of back to Sesame for a second. I mean, it's why Oscar is fun to write for. Oscar is super fun to write for because, as opposed to everybody else on the street, he, really doesn't give a toss what he's up to. He's fully himself, and the characters on the street love him, right? They love him for who he is. They love him anyway. So I think of course, there's a good heart at the center of Odd Parents, but it was fun kind of exercising my brain to think, what does Timmy want, right? Like he wants more and more. He wants bigger, and he wants some very worldly things. And so, what are the consequences of those actions, and how can they be funny? I just really loved the humor in that show. And the visual humor was just so great. I love working with board artists. I love handing off a script and seeing what they bring to it. I remember just sort of the very first episode I wrote of Odd Parents when I was still a fellow before I was hired on for the show was called Flyboy. And it came from a very vivid experience I have of watching. They used to show like black and white horror movies from the 50s, 30s through 50s on like Saturday afternoons on TV. And I remember one very bright sunny day when I had to be like 4 or 5. And I remember watching the old Vincent Price movie, The Fly, and either it was in black and white or my TV was in black and white at the time. And I remember being absolutely terrified by the movie The Fly, the original Fly movie. And that's what became the basis for Flyboy, that Timmy was really excited to see this old I guess we had it. I don't remember if the movie in Flyboy was black and white, but it was certainly in 3D. And so he was with 3D glasses and they were popping out. And somehow Cosmo and Wanda's kid, Poof, their fairy baby, Poof, poofed the head of a fly onto Timmy and Timmy's head onto a fly's body. It was kind of the hijinks that ensued. So kind of shrinking Timmy down and putting him in peril that way was really kind of personally satisfying. And it was kind of a way of exercising that old movie, not exercising, but exercising that old movie that scared the pants off me, because that was really, really scary for me as a little kid.
Yeah.
So you also got to write for the Disney Junior series, McStuffins. Can you talk a bit about writing for that?
Love that show.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys like that. I'm really proud of being on that show. I wrote a couple of episodes in season 1, and I was writing on season 2, and maybe a couple after that later. But certainly, I was on staff there at season 2. I'm proud of what that show did. I know that anecdotally there were lots of stories of kids who were telling their doctors and nurses when they go in for a checkup, like, I was a little scared of the needle, but I know that if I sing this song, I'll feel better, and there's a way of passing the time, or I won't be as scared. I know this isn't going to last long, and like I just really loved that the show had that effect on people, and that it was. I mean, I don't know about you, but going to the doctor, getting a shot as a kid was really scary, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I would dread it all week. I still hate it. It's not my favorite thing. But the fact that in any small way, we as writers could have a way of helping mitigate that and give kids a way through that was I thought really, really beautiful. I thought the show just looked great. I loved the world of that, and I really thought that it was an incredibly ingenious idea of how to again, without ever being preachy or teachy, um, kind of encouraging kids to take care of themselves and the other people around them, um, not just their bodies but also their emotions, and to take care of each other. I think that there was a sweetness about that, that I thought was really helpful. When I was a kid, there was a show. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but called Slim Goodbody. Did you ever hear of Slim Goodbody? Oh my
Heard of
gosh.
it, yeah.
Google it
Mm,
sometime, because Slim Goodbody was a grown man in like a visible bodysuit. So he had a bodysuit on, and you could see like his innards, his heart, and his liver and his lungs and all this stuff. And like he was, no shade on Slim Goodbody, but there was it was very teachy to me as a kid, and it was sort of a little borderline creepy, I guess, right? With this like tight bodysuit that you can see all the body parts through. There was just something like Doc McStuffins to me was the right way to teach kids about health.
Oh yeah,
Um,
definitely.
right? Like like I the episode the very first episode I wrote for them was called, I'm really proud of this title. It was about two little monkeys called Ben and Anna, and they were like they were attached by Velcro, like those monkeys you get at like a carnival.
Oh yeah.
And they love to, they're huggy monkeys. They love to hug each other. They're brother, sister, and they're best friends. But when Ben's patch, his huggy patch, I believe we couldn't say the word Velcro because that's a trademark name, but it was we had to call it a hook and loop patch, I think was what we had to call it. When his hook and loop patch got ripped off, he could no longer hug his sister Anna, and he had to stay overnight in the hospital. So it was about what happens when you go to the hospital overnight. Like, will I ever see? I'm scared. I'm scared. I'm going to be alone there overnight. What do I do? Um, Luckily, Ben was okay. He made it through okay, and got to see his sister again the next day. But I got to call I was walking along the beach, and I came up with the title of Ben Anna Split. And I was like, yes, Banana Split.
Oh yeah.
Because they're monkeys.
Clever.
Um,
Very clever
Clever.
title,
was-
yeah.
Very clever.
that was one of my proudest titling moments. And so yeah, like just the right. So that one's not about an actual health problem, right? But it's about how to cope with the emotions of fear, and needing to put yourself into the hands of professionals who will take care of you overnight. Yeah, he had to stay overnight while the glue on his huggy patch set, and everybody luckily took good care of Ben, and he was able to hug his sister again in the morning. It was just like that, being able to do things like that, and you imagine that hopefully somebody who needs to hear that, who's in a situation, a kid who needs to hear that, will have seen that episode and maybe take that with them into what could be a really scary situation. And I really love being a part of that.
Uh, you also co-created and directed a web series called You Got Ghost. How did that come about?
Wow, you went in a deep dive.
Mm.
You did your research. You Got Ghost was super fun. There is an amazing comedian named Britt Swenson who does. So my partner is named Jorge Avila. He's a concert violinist here in the city, and here in New York City. And he has a lot of really great musician friends. One of them was Britt Swenson, who is a violinist but also is a comedian. She would do stand up. She'd host stand up nights in the city, and she would often bring her violin on stage. And she loves crazy wigs. She loves developing characters, and she's really one of the very funniest people that I've ever met. And Britt and I can't remember which one of us came up with the idea, but we're having lunch one day or something, and we were like, she lives in Colorado now, but she was back in the city, and we got together, and she was like, we should do something. We should make something that's just for us, just as an experiment, and just see how it turns out. And so we decided to make. I have a puppet character named Spike, who's kind of he's Spike from Boston is a kind of a potty mouth Boston sock puppet,
Oh, nice.
and he's he's a little rough around the edges, but we figured that Spike would be the cameraman for a down on her luck exorcist that Britt would play, and then Britt would play all these different people in their orbit and people whose houses she needs to go to exorcise their demons. I'm using the word exorcise more than I thought I ever would in this podcast. So I think we just did it on my my iPhone. Like we spent like a couple of days on it. We talked a lot of it through, but she came from Colorado to do it, so we didn't have a lot of time. I learned a lot from that. I think, I learned that I needed better sound equipment for one thing, because we did a lot of like outdoor shots. But I think one of the great things that came out of that I love to leave people with is that we have inside your phone, whatever kind of phone you have, we have a recording studio and a movie studio and an editing studio and an effects studio. Plus, we have the means of distribution there, because you can upload it right from your phone, and you can it's this incredible tool that I really wish I had when I was growing up, because I think it made getting something out in the world really easy, making something really easy. I think a lot of people, especially when they're just starting out, think they need to oh God, I need to buy all the equipment, and I need to learn all this stuff. And yeah, by all means, have good equipment and learn everything you can. I think all of that, I'm not denigrating any of that. Go to film school, but at the same time, making something and having the means of production and distribution in the palm of your hand is really powerful. And you learn so much practically, and you learn so much about yourself when you make things, when you actually, you're like, oh, I had this idea for a story. I just want to figure out how to get it out there. I think the other thing I learned from that was, Britt's attitude was like, who cares if no one watches it? Let's do something that makes us laugh, and let's do something that there's no stakes. She kept saying there's no stakes of this. Nobody was like, when are you doing that thing? Right. We're just we're doing it for ourselves. And getting to work with her up close and seeing her comedy and seeing those characters that she came up with, was super, super exciting. And going into it with that, so many times, right? There's a lot of the things for my professional life are fairly high stakes, right? There's a lot of money, there's a lot of reputations on the line. If you're a TV writer and you're behind on your script, even by a day or a couple of days, you can really grind the calendar, the production calendar, to a halt. So I can't overstate how important it is when you're a TV writer to not be oh, I'll hand this in when I feel right? You really have to stick to your deadlines. Earlier is better. So I think going into the work with such high stakes, that where there's hundreds of thousands of dollars at stake if your calendar gets lost, to a little film that I made on my iPhone, with Britt and a bunch of crazy costumes and wigs, was really refreshing. And it was just a great tonic to the other stuff we did. And again, I think I said this to you before, we talked about the time it takes for something to actually go on the air is so lengthy. So to like write something, make something, improv something, and then like get it out within the week was really great information. Like, here we go. Let's go do this. Let's see what people say. I highly recommend it. Even as you may all go out into the world and make things and take great to take your time and make sure that um, things are just right before and everything's in place before you do them. But there's also some use to going out in the world and doing it, trying it. Like I've never made a movie on my iPhone before. Let's see how this works. Like make it, put it out, get feedback from it, and try to getting information is really hard where things take a long time. And also there are a lot of gatekeepers in the world, right? Like there's so many ways that there's so many people who are paid to say no in Hollywood. And they say no for lots of good reasons. I think they're all pretty much all money related, right? So like you go through you often go through periods. I often go through periods where you're like, I mean, look, a show I was developing, two shows I was developing in 2022 just got shut down because the business was changing, right? Like one producer left her company, and then they killed all the productions that she had been championing. And another one was being developed for a toy company, and the toy company decided that it just didn't. The creators of the show, I was brought on as a writer, but the creators, like after like a year of time, they decided that there wasn't enough toy potential in the show, and that was those things are kind of heartbreaking. And I spent in both of those cases like one was like a year and a half of my life on, and another was probably almost a year. Um, so things fall apart, things get shut down when you work at that level. Sometimes it's great to take your phone and be like, I've got some talented friends. I'm going to make this thing. I think anybody, no matter what your professional status, can learn from that and benefit from that. I highly recommend it, which you're already doing. You're making a podcast, which is awesome. You're getting it out in the world.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I
thank you.
have to huge props for that. I'm really happy for
Thank
you
you.
that you're doing this.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Much
Thank you.
appreciated. Much
Yes.
appreciated.
Yeah.
Hear the
I don't know.
howling of wolves. What's
It sounded like a wolf. I don't know what exactly it was, but it definitely it could have sounded like a wolf. And that is not a wolf. Okay, thanks, Dad. Much appreciated. I don't know what's going on in this house today, but okay, cool. Anywho, on the subject of projects you created, you have your own puppet and object theater collective, Cardium Mechanicum.
Yeah, it's
Could you talk
it's
about the creative process for that?
sure. Again, this really goes back to Leslie Carrera Rudolph, who encouraged me to go to the O'Neill for puppetry. And I went back several times, and I started developing my own puppet pieces there. I think um, the aesthetic at the O'Neill, because you have a week or maybe 10 days at best, to from the start of a project to a finish of a project. Now, lots of people do go to work on things they've been working on for a long time, but it's a great segue actually, because I think what we're talking about is very much what I was just saying of getting something out there and doing it. Because if you're a participant at the O'Neill for puppetry, you're usually going and you're like, hey, like the first day you sit around in a circle and you're like, I had this idea about the famous murder case of Lizzie Borden, and I wanted to do a piece with a woman trapped inside a dollhouse, and Lizzie trapped inside a dollhouse, and like you're like, does that appeal to anybody else? Like, does and people will respond or they won't respond, and you gather people around, and like lickety split, you put together what you need as far as you like build puppets usually out of like brown craft paper and cardboard and hot glue. You like cobble together a set. This is not like, this is not the Lion King on Broadway. You're like putting it together with paper and glue. And their concentration isn't on if you're a participant, by which I mean just somebody who's going not with a project they've been working on that they're hoping to take to a bigger stage, but just a notion really that they're trying to work up. The focus isn't on making the most beautiful puppet or like the perfectly working marionette. It's about using very simple materials to give a puppet life, and really with the concentration on manipulating the puppet so that you can channel human emotion through it. That aesthetic was really, really, really powerful to me. That like, okay, I don't need to be the greatest sculptor or painter. I don't, great. I can learn to sew. I can learn to work with felt, but I have the materials in my craft closet that I can use to make a simple human figure that I can tell stories with. Right. Once you have figures or objects, you can start to tell stories. And so Cardium Mechanicum, which is faux Latin or kind of bastardized Latin for heart in the machine. And I think the idea that putting the beating heart into objects that are not alive, you can tell a lot of amazing stories through that. So I've been working on bringing characters to life that are not actually part of children's storytelling, right? Like I find puppets to be a great tool for all sorts of theater, and not just they're a great tool for children's storytelling, but everybody responds to them in some way. And so yeah, I've been working with my object and movement object and puppet movement collective called Cardium Mechanicum. I started a new theater called Beekeepers Theater at beekeeperstheater.com, which is up in Sheffield, Massachusetts, up in the Berkshires, where we've been bringing kind of great talent from New York and the Berkshires and beyond to start to incubate new work. We're really focused on incubating new plays and new work. Sometimes outdoors, but we have a monthly night at the local town hall there, and we're gathering more and more people. I hope to keep doing more stuff with Cardium, and certainly doing more stuff with the beekeepers there. Yeah, puppets are a huge part of my life, and I just find them an endlessly fascinating quasi life form.
Definitely. So, aside from writing for a TV series, you've also written many plays. Can you talk
Yeah.
about those?
Yeah. I think I mentioned it before that theater, and this again circles back to what we've been talking about the last few minutes. I think plays can be immediate. There was one year where I wrote I wrote a short play a day for 365 days. That was kind of based on an exercise by the playwright Susan Laurie Parks, who did the same thing, did it brilliantly. I'm not going to claim I did it brilliantly, but just the act of putting pen to paper, and for a lot of those I actually wrote longhand instead of on the computer. A lot of them are plays of a few lines or a page or a little bit more, starting with an image or a character or a phrase. A lot of those, like you'd be amazed how much. And when I do teach and I coach writers, I love reading people's writing, especially as they're kind of coming up and developing their own voices. I'm really good at encouraging people to do that. And one of the things that I often start with in my teaching is to start with a one-page play exercise. You'd be amazed at how much story you can get in just a few lines or in one page. It's pretty remarkable how all the elements of a story can be present in a very, very short amount of time. A lot of my plays are bigger. They I think I said before, I work with a lot of Americana. I'm interested in folk tales and fables. I've written I did do a puppet piece about Lizzie Borden, as you may guess. But then I wrote a full length about the Lizzie Borden tragedy. With no spoiler alerts, I won't say who I think did it. But I've written. I am often inspired by true crime or American folk tales or fables. And I like trying to figure out who gets to tell the stories and, excuse me, what stories that have been passed down to us, and are they true? I'm very interested with who gets to tell the stories and whose stories get told. I did write a play called Bunyan's Body, which is a full-length play. I mentioned it before about a little girl in a mining town, a logging town. It's Paul Bunyan's logging town, and what happens when the giant lumberjack dies and his giant body is there. What do you do with it? And the little girl, especially because the whole town, their whole economy is destroyed. Everything that they built it around is destroyed. And she ends up trying to do what she can, which is with her little pail and shovel. This one little oddball girl goes to try to bury the giant lumberjack. That play for me speaks to a lot of the world we're in, where sometimes the rug can get pulled out from you, and you can feel that everything you've been working towards can fall apart at a moment's notice. That things that you thought would go on forever. What do you do when that happens, right?
Right. Yeah.
I am constantly interested in not fairy tale or folk tale or fable as fable, but really having real life resonances for real human people, of like, how do you go on? That was a central question of that play. And how you go on when everything seems to be gone. So it all ends up well in the end for her and for
Right.
everybody in that town, but takes a little work.
Nice.
Takes a little work on the way.
So what would you like to say to those who have been supporting your work over the years?
Oh my gosh. Supportive for those of you who've been supporting this work and seeing my name in the credits and liking what I do. I just am so grateful that you've been watching, and that people respond to the things I write. We've talked earlier about how much distance there is between the writing of something and the airing of it when you're working with television. So I've really enjoyed talking to all three of you about this, and I'm so touched that people are remembering some of this stuff that even has kind of receded into the recesses of my memory. The Xbox, for example, that project now it's coming back to me. I'm really, really grateful. Every time I write something, I think, who is out there that needs to hear this, and who is going to enjoy this, who will be touched by this, who will find a laugh in this that comes at the right time. And I'm really happy to hear that people are out there who are liking what I do, and are into it and remembering it. That makes me really, really happy. And please, check out my stuff at edvalentine.com. There'll be links up there of how people can work with me as a coach or a teacher or a mentor, or just get in touch and let me know that you like something. Reaching out just like you guys did to say, hey, we like what you do and we'd love to talk to you about it. I think it warms our hearts, and I hope you found that most people are happy to talk about this stuff, because I think we as creators are very grateful to people who are the audience, and we hope that what we do touches you. I certainly do.
Definitely.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And a link to your website will be in the description down below for people to connect with you.
Fabulous. I'm always eager to hear from people. Guys, thank you so much for having me on. It's been such a pleasure.
Absolutely. And the very last question, since we're about to wrap up, that Matt's about to ask, is the question we ask all of our guests at the end.
Wonderful. So, of course, this podcast is called Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show. Thank you very much. When you think of nostalgia, what do you think of? Or in your own words, how do you define the word nostalgia?
Oh, this is a great question. I mean, certainly nostalgia can have a negative connotation, I suppose, for this idea of a fondness for time gone by. I don't think of it as a negative thing. I think of it as carrying with you something that meant a lot to you, and the warm feeling that gives. I think nostalgia is a good thing. I think remembering the things that made us happy and trying to bring that back into our life, or bring in something new that gives you that same feeling, is really important. And it's something uniquely human. I don't know that, sloths or pandas often think about the good old days, or the TV they watched. Maybe I could be wrong. I've never asked a sloth or a panda about this, but I do think this is a uniquely human feeling of taking memories and carrying those feelings with us, not just into the present, but into the future, and wanting to share those great feelings and great memories with the people around us is just chef's kiss. It's just a wonderful thing.
Great words to end on.
Yes.
Well, Ed, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. This was a blast.
Yes,
Thank you very much. Thank you
Guys,
very much for doing
Thank
this.
you
And
so much.
Yes,
Oh,
and thank you so much for what you're doing to be a part of our lives, and keep up your great work. And can I wait? What's next in store for you?
Thank you guys so much. All the
Yes.
best to you,
Yes,
and
absolutely.
hope to talk to you again one day soon.
Yes,
Yes.
keep in
Yeah.
touch. I'll let you
Yes,
know when
for
this
sure.
goes up.
Please do. Thank you so
Yes.
much. Have a great day. Okay.
Thank
You
you.
too,
You too.
Ed.
It's goodbye from us as well.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
Yes.
Goodbye from us.
Yes, absolutely. Enjoy your time, Ed Valentine.
Yes, absolutely enjoyed our time with Ed. And as always, what do we say, Jake?
Keep nostalgia alive. Can I wait? Stay tuned for more fun episodes coming your way as always. And take care from all of us. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to another wonderful Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show interview. Be sure to follow Jake and the crew on social media and stream the show wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And as always, remember to keep nostalgia alive. Bye-bye.